Summer is over. That's the bad news. All of our fishing we've had, hey, some fish we've caught this past summer. We have a 35-pound musky coming up in just a few minutes. We have recipes, Bob Garner's outdoor headlines, and we have a feature on trout fishing that is a throwback to the spring. You use the same techniques in the fall as you do in the spring. We're going to show you how with some of those stream trout, maybe something you can do this weekend. So join me right now. I'm Fred Trost. It's Thursday night, time for Michigan Outdoors. Spring in the north. The trout streams are clear, but they're still cold. Life is starting to emerge from a long winter's dormancy, and May is the month we see it come alive. Here and there, the first of the spring flowers poke their heads up and add some brightness to a landscape that's, well, it's still yawning from its winter sleep. In the trout country, you'll see the evidence of beavers at work, fallen trees stripped of their branches. They don't add much to the open ground, but when beavers topple these trees into the trout streams, they provide cover for the little stream trout. They also provide food and hiding places for insects and crustaceans that in turn become food for the trout. Brook trout are one species that we're after. They're the smallest trout you'll find in Michigan streams, and they're the only native stream trout that were originally here when the first explorers arrived. Introduced later were the larger, more wary brown trout. Easy to distinguish because of their large black splotches against their brown scales. Brown trout hug the banks and undercuts, a challenge to catch, and you can see how feisty they are to hold. You don't see much evidence of life along the streams, a few water spiders, but they don't provide much food for trout. An occasional meal, but not too often. Most of the food for trout will be found under the water. Sure, it's cold, and it's been just a few degrees above freezing for a number of months. But life is active in these crystal clear stream bottoms. Taking a scoop of gravel, you can immediately see all kinds of life wiggling and squirming. Imagine how many of these little creatures are living in the rocks along a mile of trout stream. Enough to feed a lot of trout. They not only live in the rocks, but they're abundant in the roots of grasses that are growing or that may have washed into the stream. You'll find some aquatic insects that are far more difficult to spot. For example, these little tubes that are clinging from this rock are the homes of an extremely common insect, the larva of the caddisfly. Caddisfly nymphs make their homes from tiny pebbles and twigs, sealing them together with a secretion. Their mobile homes protect them from the feeding trout. To find exactly what the trout are eating, the wise angler checks the stomachs of his fish when he's cleaning them. That's where you'll find the clues to the puzzle of what the fish are biting on. Right here, remnants of insects in the front section of a tiny crayfish, which shows you that the trout are feeding on the bottom. That's where they'll find all kinds of aquatic nymphs and larvae to fill their stomachs. If the trout have eaten them recently, well, they're quite identifiable. And here's a curious finding, a little pile of stones. Why would a trout eat stones? Now look at this carefully, the way it came out of the trout's stomach. See anything you recognize? Well, it forms a familiar pattern, even with a little antenna on the front. That's right, trout will eat the caddis nymph, house and all, if it can find it. You might be wondering why earthworms are such a good bait for trout. Well, they don't grow in the stream, no, but they wash into streams during rainstorms, and worms make excellent bait. You know, one thing about fishing these little trout streams is you can do it yourself. In fact, you have to do it by yourself. You have to look for a spot like this stream right here where nobody is occupying it, at least at the moment, because you have to search out these holes one at a time. And there's a spot right down here that Carl Salling says is a hot spot. If you look right down there, where there's a log that goes across, and in fact it forms a little V. Now in that deepened area right there, he says if I can't catch a trout in there, if I can't get a fish in there, he says, hey, I guess my fishing reputation is at stake. I don't know if I really want to do this, but I'm going to give it a try, and I'll tell you how I'm rigged for it. I'm just using a rod and reel here. It's a spinning rod so that I can use light line. And you use line that's 4-pound to 6-pound test, so the fish can't see it and the bait can act naturally in the water and float along without the resistance of a heavy line. The rod is only about 4 feet long or so. It's a good idea. Oftentimes, like Carl, he uses a longer rod. In fact, he uses a fly rod to reach out and drop the bait into the holes in streams like this. But I like what I can do to cast with a short rod like this. Now I'm using a spinning reel. Now this spinning reel here, I can grab the line, flip the bail, and free spool it. So the line can whip out freely. It can allow the bait to go back under the logs, you know, without any resistance. And the rig, my terminal rig, well, right here I have a split shot sinker, a good sized split shot to carry that worm down. And here is the worm. It's on a number 10 hook. Now, Carl is using a larger hook than this, but a number 10 bluegill-sized hook with the worm hooked once through the collar. That's all I've got it hooked, and I think that this is going to be able to do it. So, I guess I'm going to attack this hole right now. Carl, you say if I can't get one here, one can't be had? Right. My reputation is going to be shot, or there's not going to be any here?
It's definitely at stake right now.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now, I got to sneak down because the trout can feel your vibrations on the bank. They can see your shadow. They can see your outline against the sky. Fortunately, I'm pretty well shaded here with the trees. So I'm going to kneel down, crawl up on this, and try to get the worm underneath there. Pull out a brook trout or a brown trout. Well, I got to get it in the faster water, huh, Carl?
That's good.
Stream fishing for trout on these tiny creeks takes accurate casting. Not just to put your bait into the exact holes and behind logs where the trout are lying, but to avoid the many branches, the logs, rocks, and snags that are frequently claiming your hooks. When you get hung up, you often make a commotion in the water as you're pulling free. Enough of a commotion to scare the trout, cause them to scatter to another hiding place. Sometimes you get your hook back, and sometimes you don't. Oh no! Lost my worm. Ding! Well, I'm done fishing that hole. Tie in a new hook and start over. Well, we're going to go to another stream, or?
We'll try another one.
We tried a number of streams without success. It had been a heavy weekend with the opening of the stream trout season, a lot of fishermen disturbing the creeks and the hiding places of trout, and that makes those little trout spooky for a day or so. So this Monday was tough fishing. Another problem was the cold water. The trout will get more active as the spring suns bring the temperatures up. So we tried a more open stream, one that flowed through some open farm country where the sunlight could warm the water, and that is where we found the active trout. Carl Salling worked ahead of me, and every time we caught up with him with our cameras, he had more success to report, which is something to remember in trout fishing. The first one to a hole usually has the best success. Oh, you do have it. Why, you son of a gun, you.
Well, I thought we could get two.
Well, you son of a gun.
That's a greedy way of fishing. However, this one's not big enough, I don't think.
The brown?
Yeah.
Gotta be. Looks like it's about 8.
Oh, yeah, he's almost 9. A keeper.
What do you do with keepers when you're trout fishing and you want to bring them home for a meal? Well, it's a good idea to wrap them in grass in your creel and then soak it with water now and then to keep the trout cool. These little stream trout have to be 7 inches long to be legal on Upper Peninsula streams, 8 inches long in the Lower Peninsula, and 10 inches if you're fishing a lake. And they might seem small, but they're a challenge to catch. And in the frying pan, oh, they are tops. A very delicate taste to match their delicate beauty. And there's our catch, thanks to the guiding of Carl Salling. But you want to know the best thing about trout fishing? Where they live. Stream trout live in the most beautiful areas you'll find. Sharing the fascination of a trout stream with the trout is one of the big reasons why stream trout fishing is so popular in Michigan outdoors. Houghton Lake, well, very windy, according to Dick Peterson. Ron Reed says it's been rough, but there was a 40-inch pike taken this past week. Talk about big fish. Look at this one, a 23-pound muskie taken by Matt Robb. That is a whopper, but look what he caught the following day. This muskie caught the next day by Matt Robb weighed 35 pounds. Look at the size of it, a northern muskie that came out of what I understand is a rather small inland lake. Oh, I see. You're not even going to talk about
No,
that.
not
See,
that
the
lake.
deal is that we made that I
All
can't
right.
reveal the name of this lake that Matt Robb caught this muskie out of. All I can say is that Matt lives in Clio. Now, let's get some other information, though, Matt. You have,
All right.
by the way, you have Rick LaBoyce here holding the other end. Now, what do you have to do with the story, Rick?
I'm just down here to help him bring it in.
Just help him hold it up. It's a heavy fish, a 35-pounder, so you were fishing by yourself, Matt?
Right. I was fishing. Well, it started out, I had caught two. The first one I caught the first day was a 23-pounder.
Mm-hmm. You caught that
And
on this?
on the MEP spinner, and I use anise, you know, to try to get rid of some of the scent and everything. And when I caught the first muskie, and that I took it to the taxidermy, and I just thought, well, I'll get started on the next 2 years, because it took 2 years before I finally had caught one.
Before you caught one muskie?
Right, before I caught one muskie. And I knew this one was out there. I've seen it about 19 times, so I went back
Now, hold
out.
on. What do you mean you've seen it 19 times?
Well, it follows. A lot of times they'll follow the lure up to the boat and then turn around and away they go. So
that's
it's
a
been
thrill.
my adrenaline rush
Oh,
right
I
there.
guess so.
That's what made me chase after them. But anyways.
Why don't you
I-
lift them up there, Matt? You guys
okay,
are
well,
falling down on the
it's
job.
getting heavy here.
I know it's
All right.
heavy.
But anyways, I went back out the next day and I started casting in about 20 minutes. I had another one on.
Now, what time of
And,
day?
This was right at noon, between
Noon?
noon and 12:30.
Great.
Right in the middle of the day.
Mhm.
And this one started jumping out of the water. It came out about 6 times and I was
Wow.
worried about it spitting the hook. But I knew it was bigger than the first one. And after about 25 minutes and running the boat backwards, because
Wow.
I got a small boat, it finally tired.
Now, you netted it yourself?
Right. See, when it comes to
Oh,
the
that must
top-
be something.
Well, I had to set the pole down and grab twice. I didn't think it was that heavy, but it was.
35 pounds. By the time you got it on the certified scales, you took it around to all your friends and
Right.
lost a pound.
Lost a pound.
So in the trophy book, you'll see next year this will be listed as 34 pounds.
34 pounds,
We
right.
all know it was a 35-pounder.
All
A
right.
great story. Rick, you've done a great job on that end, holding that
Thank
up.
you.
Rick's a big buck winner, by the way. Geez, that's a great fish, Matt. If you want to know what lake it was, you got to look up Matt. You might share the secret with somebody?
Well, a few of the friends.
Okay, now let's go to the outdoor headlines with Bob Garner.
The Capital Area Sportsman's League hosted a statewide 4-H shoot last Friday at its range near Lansing. Over 200 youngsters participated in the program, which included trap shooting, BB guns, .22s, and archery events. These kids represented 4-H groups from 22 counties, and MSU 4-H Extension Specialist Sherry McCarty says participation in the shooting sports is becoming stronger every year in the 4-H program, especially with the young ladies who are often much better shots than their male counterparts. Convicted poachers are going to get socked a lot harder this year in Michigan. The state legislature has raised the penalties quite considerably on the illegal taking or possession of all of Michigan's game animals. For instance, the penalty on elk is a minimum $250 with a maximum $1,000 fine and a minimum mandatory 30 days in jail. The moose penalty has been raised to a minimum $1,000 fine to a maximum of $5,000, and at least a 90-day jail stay is mandatory. Deer, bear, and turkeys, well, that's a $200 minimum, $1,000 maximum, and the jail sentence is a mandatory minimum 5 days. But that isn't all. Poachers will have to pay restitution too, to the tune of $1,500 for an elk, $1,500 for a moose, $1,000 restitution for a deer or bear, and upland birds, rabbits, ducks, and small game critters will be $500 apiece. Hopefully this will stem much of the poaching activity that has gone on in the past.
Now, for some questions that we will answer from this issue on bear baiting, Bob. Tony Mickham from Mikado, Michigan wants to know about a new law coming in this fall he's heard about bear baiting before the season, and what can be done about those doggone dogs running over our bait while we're hunting in the tree stand?
Well, actually, nothing can be done too much about the dogs. Everybody's got to kind of share the woods, and that's. I hate to see that argument persist to where the legislature starts to solve it.
Well, Bob, I tell you, this argument goes from the bluegill fishermen not wanting the pike fishermen to come by, and the water skiers, and the...
It just runs a little deeper, I think, in the bear circles. By the way, the laws aren't all that different than they were last year. You still can't start baiting until 14 days before the bear season.
Which is right now. Baiting is allowed right now.
In the Upper Peninsula.
That is a big problem. I don't mean to make light of that between the dog hunters and the bait hunters, and the archers especially. It's a big problem, and one that's going to be a continuing problem because they both use the same areas and they have different tactics.
Just everybody should just remain calm, though.
Loosen up, loosen up. Now, here's a fisherman, Dwayne Schrock from Battle Creek, Bob, who is from Indiana, and he loved fishing channel catfish down there with trot lines. He wants to know how we can get some rules for that in Michigan. And, of course, trot lines are a long line with many dropper hooks, which you bait the dropper hooks, leave it in the water overnight. They use them to catch catfish, snapping turtles, especially down south. Now, Bob, what are the chances of the legislature letting us use unattended trot lines?
That's the key to it. The legislature has to pass a bill. There isn't anything the DNR can do. Chances, 2 chances, slim and none right now.
That's just about it. See, the trot line is unattended, left overnight. Any fish could grab it, and we have so many fish in this state. It's not like some of the southern states that only have a few species. We have so many that we don't want grabbing those trot lines. So I'd say there's no chance of that happening.
I'd agree.
Except through your legislature. And now you try this question, folks, in our outdoor quiz.
Why do woodpeckers get headaches from hammering on trees? The skull bones of a woodpecker contain air spaces that act as shock absorbers. That's why woodpeckers can pound their beaks into trees for hours every day without suffering headaches.
Charlotte Self from Mount Pleasant, thank you for your recipe for Dilly Venison roast, because Bob Garner is going to have another piece right now.
And thank you for me, too, Fred.
Yeah, well, I think that's understood.
How about a potato
A
while you're at it?
potato and some carrots.
A couple of carrots there, too, please.
Okay,
It's
Dilly.
like a stew.
It's called Dilly Venison roast. It's kind of an interesting title, but it's like a soup as well.
More like a stroganoff, you're right. All kinds of different ingredients in this, Fred, that you wouldn't normally think of in a roast.
Like what?
Got sour cream, which is the creamy taste. Dillweed. Now, there's quite a bit of dillweed in here.
I oftentimes mix that with fish and like that.
Flour for thickening, salt and pepper, and vinegar. And the vinegar is only used to cook your roast in. And potatoes and carrots.
There's
and
the
fresh-
properly wrapped venison back there.
Absolutely. Now, you're going to brown your venison, and we're going to brown it in flour, so actually keep all the juices in, because it is going to cook in liquid.
Keep the juices in.
Yep.
In what?
The flavor in the meat.
Oh, you mean so you don't want the juices to come out during the browning?
That's right. That's right.
I see. So you're going to bread it just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit, right? Just dredge it in flour here. It doesn't take very long. All you want to do actually here is brown it, like I say.
That's a good looking roast.
Oh, very good.
When it doesn't have the fat on it or any of that connective tissue, that is as tender and tasty as you can imagine when it's cooked lightly.
Okay, now we're going to add the water to the vinegar rather than add them separate. And dillweed. Now, dillweed is kind of a strong herb, really. So you don't want a whole lot of it. Even in this roast, you don't want a lot. And
you can taste it.
you can. And
Can
I
you
like
taste it, Bob?
I like the flavor of dill. Again, the carrots and potatoes will all go in at one time here. You're going to cook this for 3 hours, which sounds like a long time, but you're just going to actually simmer it.
Well, what that does is it takes the meat and breaks it down.
And lets the carrots and
Makes
potatoes
it
get done right.
extremely tender.
Now this is your thickening. Put the flour right in with your sour cream rather than mixing it with water.
And you can see right here where we have the
And-
Dilly Venison sauce.
Right.
And
And,
that's it, that it's,
like I say, it's creamy and it is more like a stroganoff.
and the meat, let me cut a slice here. I guess I have to pitch some to Bob here
Hey, why
quick.
don't you just give me that end of the meat down there?
Just
The
the
bigger
last of it?
piece?
About 4 or 5 slices.
Okay, I'm gonna take a chunk off here, and we'll just take the rest of that roast off
Okay.
for you, Bob. You can start working on that. But here, if you take a look at this roast, scrape away the dilly sauce on it. I mean, it cuts
tender,
easily. It just
very,
pulls
very
apart.
tender.
Pulls apart like Swiss steak. Something
Absolutely.
like that. And it has a little different flavor, though, with this sauce. What do you think, Bob?
Absolutely delightful. Why do you always ask me this stuff when I got my mouth full?
Now, is it really, more people say, does Bob Garner really think it's all delightful? You really,
This is delightful. This is great.
With a big D.
Take my word for it. Absolutely. Top notch.
but
top
it is,
shelf.
it's a little different flavor, though. It
Like I say, the dill.
obviously rings Bob's chime.
With the dill in it, it is superb. I love dill.
Well,
And the sour cream.
that's
Just
the
kind of
rundown.
Compliment.
Yeah, well, you can put that on your calendar for things to make this fall with your venison. I hope this Labor Day weekend you can get outdoors. It's a great place to be. We'll see you next week. What do you do with keepers when you're trout fishing and you want to bring them home for a meal? Well, it's a good idea to wrap them in grass in your creel and then soak it with water now and then to keep the trout cool. These little stream trout have to be 7 inches long to be legal on Upper Peninsula streams, 8 inches long in the Lower Peninsula, and 10 inches if you're fishing a lake. And they might seem small, but they're a challenge to catch. And there's our catch, thanks to the guiding of Carl Salling. But you want to know the best thing about trout fishing? Where they live. Stream trout live in the most beautiful areas you'll find. Sharing the fascination of a trout stream with the trout is one of the big reasons why stream trout fishing is so popular in Michigan outdoors.